spreadsheet to use to track state standards. So what I've done so far is I've gone into Google Docs and I've created a plain old spreadsheet. I'm going to start out by renaming this spreadsheet, and I'm going to do an example using science standards. Now, science does not yet have Common Core state standards. There's a project called the Next Generation of Science Standards that's still in process. And so for science, we're going to use, in this case, I'm going to use the grade level content expectations for lower grades. If you're teaching high school, you may want to use the high school course expectations for the particular course, be it chemistry, physics, biology, whatever you'd be teaching. The next thing that I did was I went to the Michigan Department of Education website and I found the science standards. These are the grade level content expectations. I happened to pull up grade 6 as an example. There are documents like this for all the other grades. And so you can see that it starts with some overview, a description of the way that the standards are set up, etc. And then a little ways down through the document, we start getting into the actual standards themselves. And you can see that there are levels of grouping here. There's a first level that is science processes. And within that broad category, we have subcategories: inquiry processes, inquiry analysis and communication, reflection and social implications. And within those, we have more specific standards. So what I'm going to try and do is to set up a spreadsheet that mimics the structure of this PDF document. Now, we can do a lot of copying and pasting to make this easier on ourselves. So I'm going to highlight the text that I want, and I'm going to right-click with the mouse on it and copy that. In my grade level content expectations, I'm going to go into the very first cell, and I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to paste. So I have science processes as my first heading. Next, I'm going to choose this subcategory, inquiry processes, and I'm going to copy that. And then in here, I'm going to paste that in the next column. Now, you don't necessarily have to use this same structure of columns going from left to right. There are lots of different ways you could organize a spreadsheet that'll work for you. This is just one that I happen to have found works for me. All right. Next, I'm going to try and take this broad level standard. This is K7 standard SIP. So what this says is that this is a standard that applies to all grades from kindergarten through 7th grade, and it is the science processes inquiry process standard. So I'm going to select all of this and I'm going to copy it. Now you won't see the little right click and copy coming up anymore because I'm using particular keystrokes on the keyboard that I know do the copying and pasting. So I'm going to copy this, and then in here I'm going to click into this cell here. This is cell C1. We reference it by its column and row number. Now, let me show you what happens if I simply click right on that cell and then paste in here. What happens is it maintains those line breaks. It pastes. Notice that in the document from the clicks, this standard wrapped to 3 lines, and when I pasted it in here, the same thing happened, only it placed portions of the standard in each of 3 separate boxes. This is not so helpful to me. So let me undo that and show you how to paste avoiding that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click in here so that a cursor comes up there. Now, when I right click, I'm going to get the option of paste and match style in there, and the whole standard shows up in one block there. So that's a little helpful to me. If my columns are too skinny or too wide, I can simply mouse over the very edge of the column and pull them to be whatever width I happen to need. Now, going through and doing this individual copying and pasting for every single standard could get pretty boring. So let's see how we might do this with multiple standards. Here's a chunk of standards down here. This SIP 06, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. This is, again, science processes, inquiry process. The 06 tells you the grade level, and these are some of the specific numbers. So let's say that I take this whole section, and I'm going to copy all of those. Now, when I go to paste these, if I just click into this box and paste, you'll see that most of the standards did end up in their own cell, in their own box in my spreadsheet, and that's a useful thing. In this case, there were only a couple of standards that ended up wrapping into a second box, And I can fix that pretty easily. If I double click in a cell, then within that cell, I can highlight that text right there, and then I can cut the text off of that line. I can double click into the next cell and see that my cursor shows up at the very end, and I can paste the remaining portion of that standard there. So this helps me when I do have standards that wrap over multiple lines. This is going to help me consolidate them into a single cell in my spreadsheet. So you can see that this process may be a little bit tedious. The good thing is this is a process that we would only need to do once to create a source document that has all of our standards in it. Now, when I went and consolidated those standards onto one line, you see that I ended up with a couple of blank lines there. One way to edit within your spreadsheet, if you select not a specific cell in the spreadsheet, but an entire row or column. So I'm going to select row 6. See that row 6 is entirely blue there. If I right-click on row 6 there, so I just use my right mouse button, you see that a series of options come up that includes delete row. That's going to take out everything on that row, not just the blocks in column C that are blank, but everything. And I can delete any of these rows that ended up with a little bit of blank space in there. And so now I have the first section of my standards all nice and tidily saved there. You're going to repeat this process for whatever grade level and subject you've chosen.